month ahead of the January transfer window opening here at Serie Chronicles. We've got a new signing. It's me, Patrick Kendrick, delighted to be alongside Nicky, Bandini and Mina, Rzouki. I am a huge fan of this podcast already, so to be even a part of it is a massive privilege. And without further ado, I say we get into it. But I just thought I'd sort of bamboozle you there all with a slightly more masculine voice than you're used to. But there we go.
I'm so curious as to how our listeners are going to hear that one. Mina, like you about to come in.
No, I was going to say, Patrick, I can have a masculine voice when I'm sick, but I haven't been sick for some time.
Well, let's keep it that way. Yeah, let's all stay healthy. Absolutely.
Welcome.
Welcome, Patrick. I'm sure lots of you have seen it on social media. To those who haven't, really exciting news. Patrick Kendrick, who you heard just recently on with me on a week when Mina was sick, is going to be joining us full time from now on. So we've turned our duo into a trio for Serie Chronicles, and we're really excited to have him on board. He commentates on games for the international feed. You'll have heard his voice if you follow Italian football and you speak English, no doubt. Lots of times he's brilliant at his work commentating, and we're really excited to have him here to do the podcast with us every week. We do have a lot to get through this week, but we did think we should just do a very quick introduction to Patrick. So I've got 3 quick questions, Patrick. The first one is, who do you support?
I'm a Southampton fan, unfortunately. We're now down in the second tier, and I'm very much a part-time Southampton fan these days, which unfortunately, when the glory goes awry, and there's never been too much of that with Southampton, certainly not in my lifetime, I tend to... I put it down to the fact I'm busy enough covering Italian football that it's hard to keep track of Southampton matches, but my dad doesn't really forgive me for that. But yeah.
You don't lean towards like any Italian team that you sort of smile...
Well, I've got a mother-in-law from Naples, so I'll let you deduce the possible simpatia that I might have. A slight leaning towards a southern giant that happened to be wearing the Scudetto on their shirt. But that's in my free time. As and when the mic is live, then I'm as neutral as they come, despite what people will try and allude to on my Twitter feed. There we go.
I've actually only once been down to Southampton's training ground, and it was to interview Bandini, of course, Italian striker in
Southampton and Napoli player as well. So there you go. It's a perfect segue, Nicky. Love that.
But I always remember it because the photographer we had with us, I think it was, God, I'm forgetting who it was for. I think it was 442. And the photographer we had with us wanted to do this lit up backdrop so it looked like he was the saviour of the saints with light coming behind him. And he very quickly was like, this is getting too blasphemous for me. I don't want to do it. So, bless him. Good Neapolitan boy did not want to tread too close to that particular territory. Second question is a very important one, Patrick. The listeners will want to know, which of their clubs are you specifically biased against that you're going to be deliberately upsetting them?
Oh yeah, I mean probably Inter, Juventus, Milan, Roma, off the top of my head in particular. Yeah, I know Inter fans feel that I've got it in for them. So particularly when I say Di Marco scores fluke goals, but as long as he keeps performing, the next time he scores a beauty, then I will acknowledge that the one he scored against Frosinone, he meant that. But that's been the recent bone of contention. But I have worked for Inter in the past. I've done some work for Milan as well. So I like to think that because of that, I don't really have any bias anywhere in particular. And you'll know if I do.
Well, I'm not going to let myself get drawn into the DiMarco fight again. We'll have that, I'm sure, through the season. The last question, which I will also put to Mina, inspired by Duvan Zapata this weekend. If you scored a goal against your former club, would you celebrate it?
Oh, absolutely. A goal's a goal. I think you have to respect your current employers. I think you need to... I think you really need to show respect for the people you're working for, and you are representing that club. Therefore, you're representing the fans. The fans celebrate when you score. Therefore, I'm not a big fan of this model. I think you can still show respect for your previous employers in the way you conduct yourself outside of a goal. But I think when a goal goes in, you need to have that instinctive reaction, which is that guttural enthusiasm, pure joy. So I'm all for players celebrating against their former clubs. Yeah, I could see Mina grimacing there at my answer.
Mina, no, I just want to know, Patrick. Would you do like a Bonucci celebration and be like? I mean, circle your face and be like,
Mercifully, that player is no longer playing in Serie A because he wasn't one of my favourites, and so I do fear that there might have been accusations of anti-Juventus bias if I were to discuss Bonucci, but sciacquatevi la bocca, wash your mouth. I always thought that was quite aggressive and provocative, which is perfectly in line with the player. So there you go.
Yeah, that is true.
It's one of those celebrations that antagonised me lots of times because I agree with you, but then when he did it against England, it was suddenly great, which I shouldn't say because we're going to have a lot of English listeners.
It always bothers me though. I mean, I'm a Juve fan and I really dislike the celebration. I just feel like it really is so provocative, and it's just like chill out, you know. I wouldn't celebrate, but I very much agree with Patrick's stance on this. I think a goal is a goal, but I operate from a position of emotions all the time. I'm very emotional as a person, so I would not have logic in that case, and then I would be like, "Oh, Juventus, I love you so much." Of course, if my former team was Inter, I'd totally celebrate. So it depends.
You can always clarify it later, can't you? I think if you think you've scored a goal, they're going to want to interview you post match. You've got that window to then think calmly and make a very contrite apology afterwards. But one final thing on celebrations: whatever happened to the wholesome Vincenzo Montella style celebration? La Roplino, you know what I mean? Just running around with your arms out like that. I mean, that's nice, and that's not provocative. That's just someone gliding around in their happy place.
Serie is provocative. It's the home of Mourinho and Bonucci once upon
we'll get on to Mourinho. Don't worry about that.
There are celebrations and celebrations. I personally would adopt the Jose Mourinho tactic of just always picking up a suspension before I played my former team. That way you don't have to deal with it. Speaking of celebrations, though, that was inspired, by the way, by Duvan Zapata, who scored twice in in Torino's thumping of Atalanta, which we probably won't get to until the very end of the show now, having introduced it, because we've got a bigger game and well, I'll tell you what, let's go to a celebration. The end of Inter's win over Napoli, 3-0 Inter win in Naples, an astonishing result. They'd only won, I think, once there in the last 17 league visits. And at the end of it, Marcus Thuram gave it the Adriano celebration, taking his shirt off and twirling it over his head. If you're wondering why he decided to get himself a cheap yellow card, apparently he was imitating Adriano, his idol's celebration from 2005 in the Milan derby. An incredible result. I think perhaps not completely reflective of the balance of play. I thought Napoli were very alive in this game in the first half, maybe even the better team in the first half, until a goal that arrived in contentious circumstances after what looked like a foul by Lautaro Martinez in midfield. Mina, how shocked were you by Inter in this game, and has it shifted your thinking at all about the balance of power at the top of Serie A?
I think the balance of power, I think it's always been Inter. Inter should certainly win this and be the runaway leaders for the Scudetto. I think the quality that they possess, the ability to play in such a variety of different ways, the level of talent and technique available to them, tactical brilliance as well on this occasion, pressing high, changing the way that the game was played. What's so interesting about this is just Barella. As soon as you give him a little bit of space, we saw the best of Barella. This game was so interesting because when I was watching it in this first half, I actually questioned Inter, to be honest with you, because in my head I'm like, they weren't brilliant against Juventus, and I thought that was honestly an opportunity missed, especially when I look at the fact that there was, the man on the verge of retirement in Caviglia in midfield, and I just looked at Juventus's midfield, and I would have thought that if you are this Inter side on paper, this should be a stroll in the park, and it wasn't. And then they didn't have a shot on target for the first 48 minutes. They didn't have a shot, 38 minutes rather. It was all Napoli who came close, who hit the crossbar, who was somewhat recovering their ability on the ball, that quick-paced maneuvers that they were so famous for, that was somewhat lost under Rudi Garcia, who was trying to make them this like really, I don't know, vertical, direct team with lots of problems. But this is the thing with Inter, is that it changes all of a sudden. They know when to strike, and when it strikes, and when they do strike, you can see the brilliance of it all coming together. Of course, Inter has been the team that performs better in the second half, and coming in the second half and doing what they did. Yes, I think Inter have the best squad, Inter have a coach capable of really getting the best out of them, Inter have a mentality that is now one that I used to associate only with Juventus, which is that strong, we believe in ourselves. We're not going to get flustered. It's something I haven't seen from them really, other than this season. So best defense in Serie A, best attack. Inter should win this by a mile.
Yeah, I feel like I've been saying since maybe August, I just look at that team and think it's the best team in the league, and nothing yet has disproved me. But still, 3-0 in Naples is a big deal, right, Patrick?
It's a massive deal. As you said, they'd won once since the turn of the millennium. We should qualify that by saying that Napoli only came back to Serie A in time for the 2007-8 season, if memory serves. I think it was, as you said, one in the previous 17 trips. But it was a complete performance because they were able to dig in as well. It wasn't all plain sailing. And I think you said 3-0 doesn't necessarily reflect the balance of power in the match, because Sommer makes a decent save to keep out Elmas in the first half. He makes an even better save from Kvaratskhelia in the second half, where he almost just anticipates it, almost dived early like it was a penalty, just thinking this is the only place he can put it after he dropped the shoulder away from Dumfries. So there were big opportunities for Napoli, but Inter they are so unflustered. They don't really panic at all. Even in that game against Juventus, they never looked like losing the game. I think they decided the only way we can lose it is if we were to go gung-ho and try and win the match, and they learned from their mistakes the previous season. But I completely agree, and I think this is why, we'll get on to Juventus in due course, but I tend to agree with Mina that I think they will win by a comfortable margin. I don't think it'll be 17 points like Napoli won the Scudetto last season, but I think when you are so good, and even in the matches where they've dropped points at home to Sassuolo, at home to Bologna, they led in both matches. I think when you look like scoring 3 or 4 goals every single match, and on top of that you add in the best defence, then just by a law of averages alone, I'm not a huge expected goals fan, but that's what they're there ultimately to prove, is to say that more often than not, by the weight of chances that this team is producing and by the number of chances and the quality of chances they're affording the opposition, they will win more games than they will lose. And I think Inter's average scoreline in any given game would be a 2 or 3-0 win. So there isn't much danger there. They don't have that same jeopardy that a Juventus side winning by 1-0 will have, because they didn't sit back when they scored that goal from Çalhanoğlu just before the break. They go and score the second. They should have scored the third with Lautaro Martinez. He leant back and fired it over the top. That was the only surprise. And then again, Thuram scores late on. So I think just a comprehensive performance. And if anyone was starting to doubt them after they could only draw against Juventus, they were 3 down at Benfica at half-time, I think was the perfect response to that.
There's so much to talk about in this game, and I do want to get to a couple of the individuals, but I was reading this morning in Gazzetta, they had an interview with Simone and Pippo Inzaghi's father, which first of all just made me chuckle because it's so Italian. You can't imagine in the British press suddenly an interview popping up with Mikel Arteta's dad or Josep Guardiola's dad, but in Italy it's just totally normal that they've gone and chatted to the Inzaghi family. But yeah, his dad was talking about how he thinks he's seen him change, how he's become more serious, how he thinks he's seen him almost come to terms more with the level of responsibility at Inter and what he's looking after. And I do think we've talked a lot about changes to the team, like Marcus Thuram coming in, and obviously still love Marcus Thuram. I think he's been brilliant. But I was thinking about Inzaghi. I was thinking about Çalhanoğlu, who he's drawn back from being a trequartista to being a regista very successfully. And I was thinking about some of the things he's had to overcome. Of course, I'm not saying other clubs haven't had hurdles, but he's got a defensive injury crisis right now, brings Carlos Augusto into the centre of defence and gets a very good result out of him after good performance, out of him after Frey gets injured. Do you feel like you've seen this, I guess, this maturing of Inzaghi that his father's seeing?
I think so, yeah, on the basis that to be a league-winning coach, you have to be the most consistent tactician and the most consistent team over the course of 10 months. We've always known that in a one-off match, Inzaghi is as good as they come. Otherwise, he wouldn't have this superb record that he does in cup competitions. He won the Coppa Italia with Lazio. He's won the Coppa Italia twice and the Super Cup twice. It's the Super Cup, let's be honest. It's a one-off match, but you still have to go and win that game. And I think he's shown in knockout competitions, going all the way to the Champions League final last season, that he's always had that tactical ability to get the better of his opposite number, to make changes in game, to pick the right personnel, to make substitutions. And he's certainly got better in terms of making substitutions. He's a lot more he's a lot less formulaic about it. It almost became a meme, didn't it? I think at one stage, when any time one of his players got booked, he would take them off immediately for fear of them getting sent off, which admittedly I think is quite a reductive approach. However, I think it's actually quite sensible since the advent of 5 substitutions. I think it's quite a novel approach, because now you do have 5 substitutions. I mean, it reached a peak when Inter lost 3-1 in Udine last season. I remember he took off Bastoni and Mkhitaryan, if I'm not mistaken. After about 31 minutes, they'd both been booked, and Inter lost that game. So I think if we look at where they were there, that was when they lost 4 of their first 8. They were absolutely wretched at the start of last season, shot themselves in the foot in the title race, to where they are now. I think they have come on leaps and bounds. And a lot of it is the self-belief the players have from going to the Champions League final. But I tend to agree with what his father's assessment was. I haven't read that piece, I must say, but I'll be certainly looking it up. And I think it's like anything, a coach will mature. And now he's really reaping what he's sown with Inter, because it was challenging at one stage. Lest we forget, 13, 14 months ago, he was on the verge of losing his job, and he's come through that, and now he's really sort of benefiting from all of the groundwork that he's laid, and he is, as you said, he's developing players. It's not only having the creativity and the ingenuity to say, okay, I can see the skill set in Çalhanoğlu to have him playing as a deep line playmaker, which, by the way, is a role that we've seen. That's a transition we've seen before. Andrea Pirlo did it. Marcelo Brozovic did it as well. We have seen it happen in the past. There are transferable skills, but also I think he improves players. If you look at people like Di Marco, he has really developed a great deal under Inzaghi, whereby he's now arguably the best left wing back in the league.
He's developed as a footballer, perhaps a bit less in his maturity. I definitely saw a little bit of in the post-game photo. Looked a lot like a deliberate little dig at Mazzarri with the pointing in his wrist gesture, alluding to the famous Mazzarri meme. Sorry, Mina. I'm sure you're going to have a different opinion on Inzaghi, because I know you're not quite as convinced.
No, I'm not. You see, this is always something that I don't know. It's like a chicken and egg thing, like what improves players? Is it the ability to... It's a little bit like Bellingham. What is improving? I mean, Bellingham has just had like a ridiculous start to the season at Real Madrid. Is that down to Ancelotti being a tremendous coach, which we all know he is? Is it down to the fact that he's playing with like-minded, brilliant players who can understand him, who know how to make the space for him, who have the technique to bring out the best in him? And that's kind of how I feel a little bit about some of the players like Di Marco, for example, and Marcus Thuram, who Didier Deschamps made a point of saying he's playing his ideal setup. He's not out on the wing. He's playing with another striker who is a very intelligent striker. I mean, what Lautaro Martinez can do is not the same as what Romelu Lukaku or strikers can do. Others, he is a particular striker, and Thuram works with that very well, because they're both in many ways, similar with how the mind comes first. And I wonder how much of it is Inzaghi proving them, or rather just the team being on a higher level than a lot of these players have I guess, played with before, that has taught that. But I always go down to, when I think of what makes a great coach, and it's something a long time ago that Fabio Capello had said, and he said, Antonio Conte, if he leaves Juventus, he will never find that level of comfort or level of support from a management ever again. I mean, he didn't count on Inter obviously building
Conte
this.
spent the last decade confirming that, because every club he's been at, he's moaned about how they don't look after him like they did at Juventus.
Right. But it is that support. It is having somebody, it was at the time having, people like Beppe Marotta, Fabio Paratici, who listened, who worked together, who collaborated, as well as a president at the time in Agnelli, who, it was a whole band, right, that worked together. It was this team, it was a team that was so well managed, a club that was so well managed before obviously the destruction of that. And I think that's what Inter have right now. And so I don't know, it's like, if I was ever going to build a club, I would build my management first. And I think what people do is just buy really great players and hope everything comes out later, which is what Manchester United is doing so badly, right? But it is having somebody who is strong like Beppe Marotta, who allows people to work in a level with serenity in the way that Inzaghi has. And I do think that what Inter have done so well is started by building from their midfield. And I think the greatest clubs in the world invest in their midfield, whether that was Barcelona, obviously, or now Real Madrid before that. Juventus reaching Champions League final based on their midfield, and what Inter have is an astounding midfield. And when we saw that in Benfica when they brought in Klaassen and Aslani and they changed the midfield, it was like they conceded 3 goals straight away, and they're like, "What's going on?" Yes, I do. There's a lot about Inzaghi that I appreciate. I do think that he's really maturing. And I do think that he is benefiting from being allowed to exercise a long-term project. So the mistakes that he did make, so for example, taking these players off because they get another yellow card, it's very stupid at the time. It drove me nuts at the time when he was doing it, but actually it works out in the long term because now players know that when they get a yellow card, what's going to happen. So they have that in the back of the mind, and they outdo that. They have that. Sorry, I don't know how to say this properly. They have that in the back of their minds and sort of make sure that they don't make any silly mistakes. And I think that's why long-term projects, it's like Postecoglou now when he plays really attacking football, you might think it's naive, but in the long term it gives like a certain idea to these players that this is always the direction we're heading in, this is always what we're trying to achieve. And we might lose the first 5 or 6 matches, but in the long run I think this will satisfy us, and that is the benefit of having a bench and a club that allows you to have the long run. And that's what I think that Inter can give, that and what Juventus used to give as well. And I think that's on behalf of a great management, and that's what I want to point out, because a lot was said about Inter in the sense that they lost Lukaku, big players. Some people I questioned Arnautovic, but actually this club is really well run.
I never thought I would hear the day when Mina Rzouki, arch believer in pragmatists and non-idealist football, would come out swinging for Ange Postecoglou and his attack. I honestly, this is a shock to me, not just as an Arsenal fan. I'm shook that Mina is on the Ange bandwagon. There's so far to go into some of these conversations, and we've got a lot to get through, so we need to not get too bogged down. I think we can't, in the context of this game, not talk about refereeing decisions. I do want to hear what you guys thought about the big refereeing decisions in this game.
Oh, no.
It's a shame. It's a shame too, because the first goal is brilliant. And actually, what I'd like to talk about is my little soapbox I'd like to get on is, in the spring, Hakan Çalhanoğlu said, "I think I'm one of the best 5 midfielders in the world. I'm not that far off Modric and De Bruyne," and everyone laughed him, including me. And I'm starting to think maybe actually he's going to have the last laugh on that one, because I think he's been brilliant.
No,
this
come
season.
on, it's no.
But
Modric, it's like 12 seasons, guys. Like Çalhanoğlu may be the best this season, but you need to give me 10 seasons of this.
But I do want to know, should that goal have stood? Are Napoli within their rights to be mad about it?
Yes, in theory. In practice, no. What I mean by that is, in theory, yes, it's a foul. And what we'd seen prior to that goal was any time the ball dropped in a dangerous area, or any time Inter had even a hint of a transition or a possible counter-attack, Stanislav Lobotka was in the right place in the right time, either intercepting the ball or winning a tackle, much like Brozovic had done many years for Italy. And I still think Lobotka was the unsung hero of the Napoli Scudetto side. I mean, maybe that's been said so much so now that he's no longer the unsung hero, because actually everyone started to acknowledge his role in it. And he was marginalised under Rudy Garcia, not in terms of his playing time, but in terms of his role. Garcia said, "I don't want everything to go through one player, because then if you cut off one player, then you become predictable and the opposition can stop you from playing." So on that basis, if you were to foul one Napoli player to then go on and score in transition, Lobotka would be the one that you would choose. However, the foul comes so early in the passage of play, if you ask me.
Yes.
I mean, Thuram is forced wide. He has to collect the ball. He plays it to Di Marco. Somehow there are 4 Inter players in the box, all of whom are unmarked. There's time for Dumfries to cushion it down. He's unmarked. Barella's unmarked. He can flick it. And then, even then, there's no one even in a position to close down Çalhanoğlu's shot. And the way he strikes it, he could have been 40 yards out. Meret is not going to save it. So on that base, that's why I say, in theory, it's very easy as football fans to become indignant after the fact. And just, especially in the age of VAR, just going looking, much like the officials actually do as part of their protocol. They check the APP, the attacking possession phase, and their job is to go and see if there's anything stopping the referee from awarding the goal. So on that basis, it is a mistake, I think. We'll have to wait for the open VAR, DAZN's new show with all the Italian officials, for them to come out and assess the audio. That will probably be next weekend. And I'm sure they'll post it on social media. But so on that basis, the goal should be disallowed, in that it doesn't matter how many phases of play it is. That's part of the attacking phase. There was an infringement. The goal shouldn't have stood. From a Napoli perspective, you can't cling to that. You have to go about defending it, stopping the cross, stopping the shot, stopping the ball into the channel to Thuram in the first place. They had 4 or 5 opportunities to deal with that goal. They didn't. I have zero sympathy. Just so we can scotch any rumours of me being a Napoli sympathisante at source. Done.
But it's perfectly said. It's perfectly said. Like ditto. That's all I have.
I think actually, rather than the VAR part of it, if anyone is at fault in the officiating side, I mean, look, Massa's right there. He's right on top of that challenge in midfield. He has as clear a view of it as you could ask for. And honestly, when I saw it first time, my feeling was it could even be the opposite, that Lobotka may have obstructed. And it's only really when you see that arm around the waist from Lautaro that it looks a bit more like it's the other way around. I have plenty of sympathy for Napoli, because I think what makes it then feel worse is that happens. And then the second goal, which I think is a much more marginal, again, refereeing decision. I think these are not clear-cut decisions, which is why it's not a situation to go back and look at with VAR. But I think the second goal feels like you're just watching the same thing happen again, where you've had a decision that could have gone your way, that in this case could have completely swung the game, of course, because it would have been a penalty if it was given, with Acerbi going into the back of Osimhen. Having seen enough replays of it, I think Acerbi does step on Osimhen's heel, therefore it's a foul, therefore it's a penalty. Having said that, you can make a case that the advantage played was very significant. Kvaratskhelia does get that shot, which someone has to make a fantastic save on. So it's not like you lose a chance out of it, actually. You still got probably a better chance at scoring than you get from the penalty spot. And but I understand the fan reaction that you've had that first half situation when you've been playing great all half, and then this decision doesn't go your way and they score. And then the same thing happens. You should have a penalty, probably. And then moments later, Barella does incredible things, slaloming through the defence and scores the second goal and kind of ends it as a contest. So I have sympathy. I think you said this on Twitter, Patrick, and I agree with you. To me, the penalty situation, it's a penalty, but it's not clear and obvious. And this is how I would like to see VAR used, as how it was used in the Mudryk case you brought up in the Italy-Ukraine game. I think that's, to me, would be better if it was more of this sort of use and less of not. I've noticed producer Simon is highlighting the time we've been talking in the shared document we have. I want to ask really quick answers on this one, though, before we move on. I do want to ask, despite shipping 7 goals in 2 games, because Madrid and Inter, 7 goals scored against them, do you feel more positive about Napoli under Mazzarri, or are you looking at those 7 goals and going, this is bad? Mina?
Sorry. Every time I think of the third goal, it gives me nightmares. The Marcus Thuram one. Listen, you have to feel sorry for them in the sense that they don't have a left back right now. So we know that they're trying to make do, but at the same time, we can talk about the fact that, Inter also has defensive absences. It's really difficult for a new manager to come in, obviously not have a left back, and then face the best team in Italy as well as probably the best team in Europe in Real Madrid. Real Madrid is always going to be Real Madrid. I think there's something to be said to concede 7 goals in 2 games. Overall, Napoli have conceded 7 more goals at this point than they did last season. And then it's weirdly, I thought it would be a lot more. It is just the fact that Inter have conceded 13 less. And I think that they've obviously changed coaches. They're trying to understand their defensive capabilities and how to sort of get back that strength that they have. So I don't know if it's too much of a concern, because in the sense that I think that they just need a little bit of time to rebuild this under Mazzarri that they haven't had, because they've faced 2 really big games. But I do think it's worth noting that I think Inter have been fabulous in that sense from a defensive point of view. And when you think of the fact that they've lost Andre Onana and brought in Sommer, who started off and you thought, is he really that good? In the very beginning, and you thought, well, this might be a problem for Inter. And then he comes off and then produces a man of the match performance. Defensively, Inter has proved itself, and at the start of the season, they usually start off a little bit weak, even under Antonio Conte when they conceded a bunch of goals. To have this type of stability from the very start of the season, to have this kind of control at the back, as well as be able to score all of these goals, it's more about Inter being brilliant than I think right now than Napoli being poor. We have to see over the next 6-7 weeks under Mazzarri what happens on a defensive level. Are there any progressions? But I wouldn't judge him right now.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for Napoli at this point, clearly get through that Champions League group, which isn't quite done yet, and then take it from there, because the season is a long one. I personally thought some really encouraging stuff in terms of just the freedom they're playing with. I really loved seeing Kvaratskhelia moving all the way across the pitch again and getting into interesting spaces. I think they're going to be all right is relative. I don't think they're going to be title contenders, but I think they're going to be all right in this Napoli team. But we shall see. We have got some other games to talk about. Sassuolo against Roma. I'm still not sure watching this game, as I feel almost every time I watch Roma, I'm like, did they play well? Or did they just, I don't know, sort of find a way to do the right things, the right moments? Obviously, they were favoured in this game by a red card that helped them make that come from behind win. But first 6 games this season, Roma picked up 5 points, first 6 games this season, which is pretty disastrous. In the last 8 games, they've won 6, they've drawn 1, they've lost only once. They are joint 4th with Napoli in the table. Are we buying Roma's resurgence? Are they now back in this Champions League conversation? Are they going to force Napoli out of it?
They're definitely in the conversation. I would come straight in with a caveat. Let's look chronologically at those last 8 games. Frosinone at home, Cagliari away, Monza at home. The one game they lost was away at Inter. Lecce at home, the derby, which was a goalless draw, which neither team tried to play. Udinese at home, and now Sassuolo away. So I think they're matches they'd be expected to win. I think the main issue we've had with several Roma coaches now, not just Mourinho. The whole reason Mourinho was brought in the first place was to try and improve Roma's record against the other members of the 7 or 8 sisters, however many you want to call them, whether or not you include Fiorentina. They haven't done that. Fonseca had a terrible record against his rivals. Mourinho has a terrible record against his rivals as well. And these are teams that Roma should beat because of the size of the wage bill, because of the amount they've spent. And I know Roma fans will come at me and say we've had to be very creative in the way we finance these deals, and we can only bring in players with checkered injury records, because Mourinho remains one of the best communicators that there is, not only in the Italian game, but in the global game. So what he's done is he's managed to almost sell this notion of him being very down on his luck, him having to make do with these offcuts and this mismatch and this patchwork quilt of a squad, and the fans buy into it. Therefore, Roma have arguably the best support in Italy. It makes them have a very good home record, and it was essentially almost a home game there because I think 15,000 descended on Mapei Stadium. So, but if we look at the actual performances of this team, there's nothing in there beyond individual talent and individual moments of brilliance, which really reassures me about the direction that Roma are going in. And if we come back to, and I used to be a huge Mourinho fan. I've unfortunately had to reluctantly over the years climb down off that particular horse and just and look. That's a terrible mixed metaphor, I think, but you know what I mean. Basically, what I'm saying is, unfortunately, there comes a time when you can no longer deny what is patently obvious and is in front of your eyes, and that is that I don't think Mourinho improves teams. I don't think he develops footballers, and I don't think this is the right fit for Roma. I think they'll do enough to qualify for Europe. They might well win another European competition, and that would be great for the club, but I don't think it's necessarily a long-term thing, and I don't like it.
I just want to ask you, because you said Roma fans will say we only get these players because they're injury prone, because those are what we can get. Why are those the only ones they can get, out of curiosity?
Well, Mourinho will say it's because they don't have the budget and they're hampered by financial fair play.
So do they need to go for big names that are injured, or better not to go for big names like Kvaratskhelia wasn't, and perhaps be actually a phenomenon?
Oh yeah, if they could do some better scouting like that, I'm sure. I think
so. It's not an excuse that they use, which really bothers me that they use these excuses.
No, I think it's an excuse that Mourinho has been saying when people have levelled at him. They said, should you not be playing better football with this standard of players that you've got? Paulo Dybala, Renato Sanchez, and he will come back and say, we've only got these players because they have consistently negative injury record over several years, whereby big clubs were no longer willing to take a chance on them. So in terms of their talent, they should play for the absolute elite. We're getting them at Roma because we are willing to look past the fact that they might be unavailable for half of the matches, because we are happy to enjoy and make the most of thrive when they are available for selection. So it's a bit of a trade-off there. But I think it just comes back to the fact that it's not only they're not playing good football, which I think is a prerequisite when you're at a club like Roma that doesn't have a particularly long and great winning tradition. If you're at Juventus, then you can get away with playing negative, turgid football. And again, that is all subjective. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, just so we clarify that. If you're at places like Roma and Napoli, where aesthetic quality is such a huge part of life because of where you live in terms of the architecture of the place, the scenery of the place, the weather. I think all of this plays into the way that a fan base perceives their football team. I honestly believe that. And I think that's what's so great about Spalletti last season. He not only won the league with Napoli, but he embraced the whole aesthetic requirements, which he kept referring to. He said, this was Maradona's team, we have to play a certain way. I think Mourinho should be harnessing the same thing. I think he should be saying the greatest legacy that Francesco Totti can have at Roma is for Roma to be playing flair football. You know, we want players who are just producing those, because these days people just dine out on watching back. I mean, Totti's one of a kind. But what I mean is, I think if you're not winning matches, then you can't just go about keeping clean sheets and playing negative football and just getting results. No, I think that was one of the mistakes in the first place. I think they've got an American ownership that were seduced by having a name. I think he's done a great deal for the club in terms of raising their profile, but I don't think it's a long-term solution on the pitch. I just don't think it's sustainable. And I think we're seeing that. You know, why are they getting this result here? Because there's a penalty and then there's a deflected goal. I mean, if we come down to it, Roma came from behind. They trailed away at Sassuolo. There's a red card, a penalty and a deflected goal. That's how they won the match.
That's what Giannissi said. He said it's an own goal and it's a penalty, and that's how they won it. And we're the only team that,
Yeah, and then if you add to that the fact that then the Roma fans' ire is stirred up pre-match by these ludicrous comments from Mourinho about the referee, about Domenico Berardi. It's so antagonistic, and it's not what we need in the Italian game at the moment. The Italian game...
That's what I was about to get to.
It has real issues. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd be very curious for your thoughts on that, Nicky, because I was just flabbergasted. I had to go back and watch the press conference because I saw the quotes being reported, and I said, there's no way he said that. And he said it.
I mean, he's astonishing, and I always trade this line with Mourinho because I actually said this at a Guardian live show the other day. The problem is we want people to behave the right way, and to always sort of act the way we think they should. And actually, if everyone did, it would be less entertaining as a spectacle. And frankly, we all enjoy sometimes that people in football get a bit childish. We like the childishness. We do, otherwise we wouldn't consume it. When Aurelio De Laurentiis, for example, goes to a league meeting, gets annoyed at everyone, calls everybody a dickhead and jumps on a moped, I'm not going to pretend I don't enjoy it. I do. I find that stuff adds to the drama and makes it funny. And Mourinho treads that line, doesn't he? A lot of the time he's quite funny. But when he's calling someone, well, would you question their emotional stability? I can't remember exactly the phrase he used now, but that's exactly what he does. He questions Marcianello, the referee's emotional stability. That's really inappropriate and offensive to say to someone who's a professional doing their job, and undermines the whole refereeing sort of group, I think, in Serie A. And I think that the aftermath, when he does his whole, I clearly just am not communicating very well in Italian, which you've been speaking fluently since at least 2008, right? I remember those press conferences when you showed up. You speak Italian just fine. You are, in fact, not just speaking Italian fluently, but using words cleverly like pirla to trick, sort of, not to trick people, but to convince people that you're not just able to speak this language, but you're really fluent in it. Nobody's buying that. Nobody's buying that at all. You have to give your post-game interview in Portuguese. The post-game interview in Portuguese, hands up. The fact that he did it made me giggle because I was like, it's so ridiculous. That's the theatre bit. That's the bit that's fun. But the treatment of Marchinaro is not appropriate. That's a professional trying to do their job, and I think that's the line which for me it becomes not okay. Mina, you want to come in?
I was just going to say, like, one of the reasons why I thought Mourinho was such a charismatic leader back in the day was the stuff that he said. By the way, a lot of the times I agree with. I mean, Sarri says some rather outlandish things, but a lot of the time I can see where he's coming from. I mean, it's dramatic. It's always fun to watch drama, but you also don't want to feel like it's just you're being gaslit, because we get enough of that from our politicians. I don't want to see it on the football pitch, in all honesty. Yeah, it's different when he used to come out and say, for example, which I somewhat agreed with. I mean, Barcelona can put UNICEF, and then meanwhile, like, you've got like these ridiculous games against like Chelsea, in which you're thinking, can Chelsea get a penalty or not? And when he would call that out, Mourinho, or would say stuff, you would be like, there's a part of you that's like, yeah, he's just calling it out, right? But on this occasion, when there's a concerted effort to throw Berardi under the bus, and you're just like, and Dionisi was like, this man has just been he's just been rendered like the worst example of sportsmanship, which is very unfair. It just seems like Roma have benefited the most from players being sent off from the opposition. That's 10 now. That's 10. And so all of this whole like gaslighting us all into how, it's just so unfair. It's just so unfair what's going on with what he's doing. When he mentions the fact that what can we do? Everyone's injured. You chose to go with this idea because you don't know how to develop youngsters in the same way as perhaps, I don't know, a Sarri could or a Spalletti did. You have chosen to go for these big names because these big names won't come to Roma. So you'll take them at half value and say, what can I do? They're not available. It's just intellectual prostitution, which is what he always accuses everyone of doing. And that's what I think is so angry and annoying to watch. The whole thing is just fake at this point. It's absolutely fake. You have spent a lot of money in your first season. I don't care about your second season. You spent a lot of money in your first season. You got the best player from Juventus and arguably one of the best players at Inter as well as your strike force. One of the best number 10s, The fact that you can't make something out of this is about you and entirely on you, because referees have not been unfair to you whatsoever. And you have the third highest wage bill. You should be producing better football. And the fact of the matter is that he can never face that, just like he did in the Europa League, where he goes to an parking lot and displays this ridiculous behavior. And now it's not fun to watch, because you watch people like Ancelotti, who does everything with a smile on his face and manages, you can be pragmatic and boring and still get Allegri is pragmatic and boring, but it's not all just gaslighting. And I think that's what makes it so annoying to watch in this. I felt sorry. And also, like, all his assistants get sent off in every single game. Once again, another assistant was sent off. It's just ridiculous. And not giving the ball back to Sassuolo so that they can start a game. So I feel a little bit sorry for Sassuolo in this match. Listen, there is enough talent in Roma to be winning these matches for sure. I agree exactly in what Patrick's saying. If you look at that long run, they should be winning these matches. They actually are at least somewhat playing a game in which Sassuolo were the team on this occasion that were like defending and counter-attacking, and especially became that when they went down to 10 men. And at least Roma now has more possession. But are they doing much with it? Are they showing us the flair of what they can do? I don't expect that. I don't necessarily have to see that. I'm not somebody who needs to see a great, beautiful football. But you've chosen to go for Mourinho, so I understand that that's not going to be on the top of your list. What he's done for Roma, I don't negate. I think he's done a lot in terms of publicity. I think he's done a lot in terms of filling the stadium, but he's starting to be something that's like poison for Serie A. I don't think it's fun to watch anymore.
And just one final point on Mourinho. Sorry, Nicky. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think he's extremely intelligent. I think he's very good at working a situation in his favour, whereby he says, you watch, the referee will book Gianluca Mancini after 10 minutes. It's perfect. So because if the referee does book Gianluca Mancini, he says, you see, I told you so. Yeah. If he doesn't, and he's achieved his objective, which is avoiding Mancini getting the yellow card. It's the same thing with his young players. They're shorthanded. They're shorthanded in terms of who they have in the squad because of injury record, whatever it may be. So if the young players come in and Roma lose, Mourinho says, well, look, I was forced to play the kids. These are the best players we've got available for selection. If the young players come in like Eduardo Bove and thrive, Nikola Zalewski, he says, look at how great I am at promoting players from the academy. He's very good at working a situation in his favour, regardless of what the outcome is.
Yeah.
I would love to keep having this conversation, but I am wary that we've got still a lot of things to talk about we haven't got to yet. Those were good topics we wanted to have a good chat about, but still we might be a bit quicker through the remaining games. Milan Frosinone, a much needed win for Milan after all their recent struggles. I can't say that I personally found it a very convincing one. I thought right up again until Luka Jovic scores for Milan. I'm not certain they were the better team at home to Frosinone, but he does score. And the two heroes of the day, as far as I can see, or from my perspective, Luka Jovic finally scoring his first goal and getting an assist as well on Tomori's goal at the end, but also Mike Maignan, who made a fantastic save from Suni right before Milan's first goal, and then that 60-yard pass for Pulisic on the second goal. I guess sort of quick thoughts on this one. Are we feeling better about Milan after this, or is this just one of those games where they managed to get across the line?
In all honesty, it's annoying because if Cooney doesn't sort of miss that perfect goal in front of him after he dispossesses Tomori, and I'm thinking his throw on goal is going to be a goal for Frosinone, and he scuffs it. For me as well, it was annoying to watch Sule in the second half, because this is one thing that I used to always think in my head, was that when Sule is trying to score, he becomes a little bit desperate, and then it starts being quite individualistic. And so Frosinone perhaps lost their ability to play as a team in the second half as it got harder and harder for them to try to break through. Milan really needed this, and in the words of Gazzetta, this was the perfect opponent to play, and I agree with that. This is the perfect opponent to play because they're attacking, they leave spaces, but at the same time, they play good football. They can't always convert all their chances away from home. Milan needed to get their strength back up. They still don't have Leao, obviously, or Giroud, and this was just a chance to give it to Jovic, who after 189 days finally returned to scoring. So I still don't think he's a great player. But at least I think in this way, sort of, it gives them somewhat peace of mind to just take a breather after what happened in the Champions League. And I think for a second we can almost forget that, because they are in third position. Frosinone didn't take their chances. And also some of the goals, like Pulisic taking down that goal, and the Mike Maignan assist, that whole game, that whole goal was just fantastic to watch. And also Teo Hernandez playing as centre back, I think it was the right decision. There were lots of question marks as to whether or not they should have called up Simic, called up the youngsters, but purely said that actually it was Teo who wanted to play in centre back, who said I can do this role, and he did it very, very well. It was also a welcome return to Benacer. So I think overall it was a good, positive day for Milan. Had this been a Roma side, a Juve side, then perhaps it would have been pretty horrible for Milan. But I think all in all, this was a good performance from them. And for Frosinone, you could just understand that this is a young team that's yet to really be able to make the difference in these types of matches away from home.
I think it's worth saying actually on that. I feel like Frosinone is one of those names, when you hear Frosinone, you think, well, okay, for the big teams, that should be an easy game. And they're actually just playing good football this season. They're a good team. They're a competitive side. They've scored 20 goals already this season. They're not pushovers. And so when we talk about Milan having some trouble with them in the first half, that's not something to just go, oh, well, that's because Milan are bad. Frosinone can be good. But I agree with you on Teo Hernandez, and I think it's worth saying that a lot of clubs, I feel like, are having injury crises of some degree at the moment, but I think Milan's defensive injury crisis does take the cake a bit. You're looking at 5 out of your top 6 centre-backs with injuries, and having to put Teo Hernandez in there is a lot. And certainly in the Champions League was a big thing. Patrick, if there's anything you'd really love to say on this game, then do. But if not, then I was going to jump us on to Monza against Juventus, which was a very entertaining game on Friday night.
I think just in 30 seconds, I think you have to say the positives for Milan. 2 straight league wins, back-to-back clean sheets. The clean sheets, the defensive solidity was the bedrock of when they won the title under Stefano Pioli. I think they're going to get
players. Frosinone scored. Brescianini scored.
Apologies, Brescianini scored it at the end. It was 3-1, absolutely. Let's cut that. Let's move on to Monza. Let's move on to Monza Juventus. You can tell I had one eye on the snooker, can't you? Right, there we go.
Monza Juve, Friday night. Hugely entertaining game. I think it's sort of hilarious that Juventus go to Monza and have, less than 35% possession, concede a goal in the 92nd minute, and yet somehow when Federico Gatti takes a swing and a miss at a shot in the 94th minute, whatever it was, and then scores, my reaction is, well, of course that's what happened, because that's what's going to happen. It's Mina's making me laugh because Mina's dying off camera. But that's just sort of how I expect things to go at the moment for Juventus.
I really do think God really loves them at this point. That goal is one of those goals when you're like, how is Gatti playing for Juventus? But at the same time, it's well done on not getting it. Like, as in, well done on sort of swinging a miss, because everyone had fallen down by that point, and then you could actually score freely. This was, for me, a really interesting game, just because largely I did kind of feel like this was a derby because of Carboni and because of Gagliardini being sort of, into boys. And I feel like it was their determination to try to somehow get Monza back into it. I think what I enjoyed most of all is just obviously the last 6 minutes. Let's be honest with you. We know that what happens with Juventus is that as soon as they get a goal, they just want to go back and defend. And there's a part of me that loves that about them. I feel like they're a team to depend on. You know exactly what to expect, and it gives me. I don't know if you're one of those people who watches TV shows, but I have a friend of mine who every show she watches, she finds out the ending before she starts to watch it, so that she feels safe. Because otherwise she gets really scared if it starts to go in a direction that she's not comfortable with. She likes to know the ending. And I kind of feel like with Juventus, I sort of like to know what's going to happen. So in the 91st minute, when Monza equalised, and fair play to them because they had been trying a lot, but obviously Juventus defend like a wall. And they get that. And I think, oh my God, how embarrassing that you didn't know how to get the second goal. And yet that performance from Adrien Rabiot, I don't think there's much to talk about with Juventus because it's always same old, but that performance from Adrien Rabiot was fantastic. He captain of Juve at the moment. It will go back to Danilo, but the desire to prove himself, we talk about midfielders. That's effectively what Juventus are missing, great midfielders. And right now they do need to lean on Rabiot, who can show you that, which he did show last season. And then it's sort of the World Cup came, and perhaps you saw less of the great Rabiot that you saw from the first half of the season. But it is needing players like that who can come back, who can effectively push the ball forward, keep putting forward, cut it to Gatti, who then scores that goal. We need more of that. We need better midfielders at Juventus for this to be a better team. But I just think with the players that they do have available, I'm always surprised that they managed to stick to fino alla fine. And they are always a team to depend on.
Is Adrien Rabiot
World
not
class?
We've been so critical of him for years.
Oh
but
no, I love him. I've loved him for years.
He's the best player on a Juventus team that's second in the table. He is. He's their best player.
Okay, let's not be misled by statistics. Okay, I think unfortunately there's been this feeling with Rabiot where last season he was unbelievable and the previous year he was appalling because he went an entire season without scoring a goal. Last season he scored 11 goals in all competitions. Only Vlahovic, with 14 by the way, scored more than Rabiot, and those were from midfield. He had a number of these games where he was scoring braces. I remember he scored 2 against Empoli, gone an entire season in Serie A, 38 matches without scoring. There are all these statistics, and once he got back amongst the goals, I think then he just started to grow in confidence even more. But I've always liked him. He's very elegant on the ball. He's got a lovely left foot. Positionally, he's very sound. He knows where to be. He doesn't give the ball away easily. I really like him in that 5-man midfield. I think he makes it look relatively effortless. The way he gets up and down the pitch. Yeah.
When did you like him? Recently, or are you talking about a few seasons?
I've liked him ever since he's been at Juventus from Paris Saint-Germain, and I think Allegri has actually got the best out of him. And there was a recent interview that he gave with Alessandro Matri where he said as much. He said, I was signed just as Allegri left, so then he's naturally not going to benefit from having Sarri for one season, Pirlo for another season, Allegri coming back and having to get used to this new team that is partially his, partially isn't. And now we're seeing Rabiot last season, second season under Allegri, this season kicking on. I just think he's become Juventus' most important player. And is there a better response to your star striker, huge money signing, who's been heavily criticised, misses a penalty? So what do? You bail him out by scoring with a header in the very next thing. And then what happens? Keane is casual defensively. It's a really poor goal that Juventus concede. They're just dropping off, allowing Carboni to wander inside it and drift that ball in. Then what happens? Again, he says, I'm no longer wearing the armband because Danilo's since come on and taken it back. But I'm going to get my team out of trouble. And to me, that is what a leader is all about. That's what a captain's all about. And of course, you can't always do it. I mean, you can do it if you're someone like Messi or someone like that. To do it from midfield, I think, is all the more impressive because Rabiot is not known necessarily for his goal scoring. So, Juventus are very good from set pieces, as we know, so they're able to score that goal. And Allegri came out post-match and said the penalty was irrelevant. It doesn't matter at all. And Vlahovic needs to put it out of his mind because we scored. We got the corner because he missed the penalty. So we couldn't score twice. We could only score once. We either score from the penalty or score from the corner. I love that pragmatism. It's just, ultimately, it's very Machiavellian. We need to score a goal to win a game. We got the goal. I don't care how we got it. We got the goal. And then similarly, they needed to score a goal to win the game. And Rabiot decides to grab the game by the scruff of the neck, charges into the box and cuts it back for Gatti. And then Juventus, with that good fortune, get the goal. And I love how Gatti is becoming this cult figure for Juventus. I just think it's fabulous.
I do think there's a bit of a protection there for Vlahovic there because firstly, I'm not entirely sure it is a corner because it did go off Vlahovic. So I'm not sure a corner should have been given, in all honesty. And that was something that was being talked about, I guess, by the Italian media as to whether or not that really should have been a corner that they scored from. And Palladino was asked that question and he said, well, it's a shame that a goal came out of it. I think there was another opportunity to get another goal from a corner. This is the fifth corner that Juventus have scored from. We know what they can do in set pieces. This is what I mean by Juventus and their many wins. But I do think this is an 80 million euro striker. And this is the third mistake he's made from 5 when it comes to penalties. And I don't want to be harsh because there's, Napoli miss every penalty that they're given anyway, and they're just a bunch of great strikers.
They've scored 4 from 6. They're just qualify that. They missed 2 out of 6. So, yeah.
Okay. I guess, when I'm thinking of them in the Champions League, I think every time they got a goal last year, a penalty last year, I used to see it not going in. But Italy has a problem. I mean, Jorginho misses every penalty for Italy as well. So, I mean, there is a problem with penalties sometimes, yeah. But it does make me worried also because with Vlahovic, you see a mental decline after he makes a mistake. I don't see the same Vlahovic performing afterwards because it has a knock-on effect. And we used to sit here for so long and talk about Alvaro Morata and the fact that he doesn't have this confidence and he doesn't have the right belief in himself. But Vlahovic is showing that, except he's just, so much more expensive. And there is a part of me it's angering to me that the people who are getting the goals are defenders more than it's the attackers. And so I think that's worth mentioning. I do. Yes, Rabiot, I don't know. I'm not going to lie. Before Allegri, I thought he was awful. There is a Champions League game in which I just remember so well that it was literally because of him that we lost. And the one I'm talking about, Nicky, it's when De Ligt turns around to him and goes, you just had to cover the space. When they were knocked out in their last, time, not last year, the one before, under Pirlo, I believe. And it just annoyed me to submission. This is just Rabiot in a nutshell for me. And yet I do, like he said, when they asked him why he decided to stay on this season, he did say, Allegri staying on the bench is the reason I decided to stay. So it's very clear that Allegri is the one who believes in him, who said that he should be scoring 10 goals a game because as a midfielder, he has enough in his power. He is called the crazy horse to score these 10 goals. And I think we are seeing a better side to him. I'll be honest with you, if you ask me to choose my best midfield, he wouldn't be part of it in general, as in from Serie A. In Juventus, he would be part of it.
Oh, okay,
but I think Juventus...
No, I don't...
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, but I think that...
The problem with that is it's just very easy to go, well, the best midfield in Serie A, and you just pick three guys instead.
I think he would start ahead of Mkhitaryan as the left mezzala in Inter's midfield. I think if he were there, him... Çalhanoğlu and Barella, I would have them as my midfield on the basis they don't have a left-footed mezzala. So on that,
I'd have Lobotka.
Yeah,
he's not mentioning
Lobotka.
You'd have to have a fight between Çalhanoğlu and the book for who gets Vidista and someone else pushes on.
Çalhanoğlu back into mezzala, I guess. Yeah.
I would prefer Anguissa over him. I'm not going to lie.
Anguissa has had some. I feel like he's been less sparkling recently, but he has been very, very good. It's a really interesting conversation. Our best midfields. At some point, we should probably do a one-off where we do our favourite 11s or something.
Nicky, just on Juventus, would you not look at it because we had a very half glass, half empty take there from Mina, which I get. where you're saying
Yeah.
you're worried because the defenders are scoring. Could we not take a glass half full look and say, Juventus are still winning, the defenders are scoring. Just imagine what they'd be like if and when Chiesa and Vlahovic start scoring. Could we not look at it that way?
I think that's absolutely fair, and I think that Vlahovic it's been better for me this season than the numbers suggest. I think it's obviously unfortunate to miss that penalty, and I was reading just this morning that there was an open portion of training where he'd been taking more penalties. He's clearly sort of taken it to heart a bit and wants to not keep doing it. I sort of agree with you, and I also sort of think, yes, but this is still a team playing with 35% possession, so you're not going to see them suddenly score 4 goals against people. That's not going to be what happens. Whether it's defenders scoring it or it's an attacker scoring it, that's just not going to be this sudden uncorking moment where they start blowing teams away. But I think they're incredibly impressive for being second in the league and for having the resilience to get these results. I think Juventus are, and again, I worry I'm going to be repetitive with this season, this podcast, because until someone proves me wrong, it's my belief. I think that Inter are clearly the best team in Serie A, but I think Juventus are the one team that can challenge them. That's how I see this season. We have run already to almost an hour with this recording, which is we kind of knew it was going to be long. It's our first time as a trio, but I think we should rattle through what's rest if we can. The rest of the results this weekend, I'm not going to stop to have a big chat about them unless there's anything you want to jump in, please do and say. But the results we haven't talked about so far. On Saturday, Genoa drew 1-1 with Empoli. Lazio beat Cagliari 1-0. Sunday, it was Lecce 1, Bologna 1. Udinese 3-0 with Verona, very entertaining game there. And Fiorentina's 3-0 win over Salernitana. Fiorentina scored 102 goals in this calendar year. It's the most they've ever scored in a calendar year. Impressive stuff. My personal highlight from the weekend, I did want to mention from Lecce's game against Bologna. We had Ivan Provedel score a goal earlier this season in the Champions League, but Vladimiro Falcone, who, I'm sorry, every time I say his name, it conjures up like in my head what an Italian would name a Bond villain, because it's this sort of perfect, this
exactly
perfect
that, you said it,
combination.
yeah.
He's this giant figure, goes up in the second half injury time for Lecce, and is fouled, so he doesn't score himself, but wins a penalty that allows Lecce to draw with Bologna. According to Opta, it's the first time since they've been keeping records, 2004, that a goalkeeper has won a penalty for their team in a Serie A match. So very funny moment. Less so for Bologna, who of course have been playing very well and getting good results. But had to highlight that. Was there anything else, just very quick snippets from the weekend, anything else you wanted to mention?
Is Provedel the best keeper or Sommer?
I think he's Serie A's best keeper. He won the award last season, didn't he?
He did.
Just wanted to ask.
Mike Maignan won the best goalkeeper award last night at the Gran Gala del Calcio, which is organised by the Players Union.
And Vicario was a really overlooked last season as well in general, just because we tend to always look. But would you say that right now, who's your best goalkeeper?
I think Maignan can be, but I think Maignan has not quite been as good as he was since injury. And for me, Provedel's been a bit more consistent. I think Provedel's very, very good.
That's it.
So, yeah, that's the results. We mentioned also Torino's win over Atalanta Zapata with 2 goals against his former club. We also had the Euro 2024 draw since we've last spoken to you. Yet again, we found ourselves stuck with Spain. It just seems to happen, doesn't it? 6th time Italy have met Spain at the Euros in the last 5 tournaments. It's also Sweden and Switzerland in the group. I think it's going to be a tough group, but I also absolutely adore our Chiti, our manager, as I know that Patrick does as well. So I'm looking forward just to being there, I guess.
Croatia and Albania, no?
Wait, what do you mean Switzerland and Sweden?
Sorry, my brain went completely wrong there, because I have 2 things in front of me. I was looking at Italy's women's group for the Nations League. That's me with my being distracted while I'm talking. Yes, sorry. Croatia and Albania in the Euro 2024 group. I was skipping ahead of myself, listeners, because I was going to mention that Italy did beat Spain 3-2 in the Nations League, Sweden and Switzerland, the other teams in that group. Apologies for my brain trying to do 2 things at once.
Italy usually beats Spain anyway in the matches that matter. We lose in the Nations League, but we do. Oh, actually, that's not true. Euro 2012 final. I forgot about that. But generally speaking, I think it couldn't have gone any worse, really, other than facing France and Netherlands in that group. But if Italy want to be a team to be taken seriously, then they should be able to overcome Albania and Croatia. Spain might be a little bit harder to get over, but I don't really rate their coach anyway. So let's see.
It's a forgiving format, isn't it? I think ever since it's been moved from 24 teams down into a round of 16 as opposed to straight into a quarterfinals, that means that half of the third place teams go through. So I think if you're Italy and you play Albania first, you win that match, and then you try and take a point from the next two. Obviously, you'd like to win the group in terms of confidence and getting the most favourable draw. But as we've seen with the format from 4 years ago, and even in 2016, I think it's going to be the third tournament now with the third place teams, the 4 best third place teams going through. It's quite hard to know your fate until all of the matches have been played. So it's not like it's not like the Champions League where you win your group, then you're going to play a runner-up in the round of 16, and after that, then it's anyone's game from the quarterfinals onwards. This is a case of you have to win your knockout matches. You need to rely on going through, and then you need to show what you can do as Italy. And we saw that in Euro 2020, that you don't necessarily even need to win over 90 minutes. You don't need to win over 120 minutes. You can win several matches either after extra time or on a penalty shootout. But I think the most positive thing is that there is a clear desire that Italy want to play an expansive brand of football, that they want to play football, take the game to their opponents and try and beat the opposition. And I think that will serve them well in the long run. I think it might be a bit too soon if they were to come up against England or France, if they are playing an open game, which Spalletti has promised to do. I think that's where they could be caught out. Whereas I actually think that's where you'd be better off having a system like the one that you would operate under Conte, where you just decide to try and stop the opposition playing, hit them on the counter and be a bit more cynical. But I think if provided Spalletti is given time and provided he's given until the next World Cup, I think this is the first step. Italy fans need to temper their expectations. Make it through to the knockout stage. It's a successful tournament. Anything more than that is a bonus in my mind.
And yes, just to be more clear than I was a second ago, tripping up over myself, Italy's women defeated Spain in the Nations League 3-2. They're fighting against relegation in that group with Sweden and Switzerland. But listen, it's not been a particularly upbeat period for Italian women's football. The national team were a real disappointment at the World Cup, but that's a really, really, really compelling result in a group which Spain have absolutely been dominating everyone. So that was why I had that in these notes to mention as well. Coppa Italia, round of 16 coming up this week. Lazio play Genoa, Fiorentina play Parma. I think that's all we've got for this week. Been really fun having you here for a first episode as one of our full-time co-hosts, Patrick. So before we go, some shout-outs to some new Chronicles tifosi. Liam White, established 1886, I've got written here. I don't know if that's a name. It's an unusual name. Eric O and Austin G, thank you all so much for joining our Patreon and becoming Chronicles tifosi. You can all do that. If you are listening and think you'd like to help support the show, head over to seriachronicles.com/Patreon now.
That is all for this first episode of Serie Chronicles with the new look format. We'll be back this time next week and with some other content besides. You can find us on all of the social, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. All of the links are in the show notes. We'll be back very soon. Bye-bye.
Chronicles is a Chronicles production.